5 years ago, I worked for a company that was based in London, and I would every so often travel to and from London to Manchester. I had just recently passed my driving test and had a new BMW car, which was my first car. I was quite accustomed to driving on motorways, and this one night I had decided to do some overtime and had finished quite late, 10 o'clock to be exact. I dreaded driving at night, but due to family reasons, I had to travel back to Manchester. So I set off on my journey on the motorway. As I passed my exit off the highway, I realized that I had taken the wrong exit. I blamed it on tiredness and the long drive, but I followed the navigation system in my car, which took me onto some countryside narrow lane road. It was pitch black, and with nothing but my beams illuminating the road ahead. I drove on. As I passed some old lodge on my right that was long abandoned, I noticed a car just off the side of the road, near the lodge. It seemed like it was just pushed onto the side, like someone had left it there. I must have slowed down while I was passing it because I remember glancing into it and I couldn't see anyone in there. Just a bit further on, I noticed a man on the right side. He must have been late 30s, maybe older. He had his back to the car as my lights caught him. He seemed to jump back. I thought maybe he was taking a piss or something. He seemed to move into the road, forcing me to stop. He came to my window and leaned down. "Hey man, my car's broken down back there. Can you give us a hand?" he asked me, with a smile on his face. He had a light stubble and was wearing a cap. "Nah man, I'm kind of in a rush," I answered him, trying to be honest and not seem mean at the same time. "Tell you what," he said, "just give me a ride to the next patrol station up there, and I'll get someone from there to help me." I considered this for a minute. Call it luck, or instinct, or whatever you want. But at that exact moment, I saw in my rearview mirror just a flicker of a shadow, just a black flicker. I floored the pedal as hard as I could. The man tried to reach for my steering wheel, but I was moving away too quickly. In the rearview mirror, as I was going, I saw another man rise from where he had been crawling on the road behind my car. He was holding a small-handled pickaxe. I didn't ease up on the accelerator until I made it back home. I called the police when I made it home and let them know what had happened. I thought after that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, 2 officers showed up at my house. They asked me about the situation that had happened that night and told me that they had arrested 2 individuals on that road, and if I could identify them. I told them I had only seen one. Regardless, they showed me the pictures. I recognized the one with the cap. The other seemed to match the rough outline of the guy who had been crawling on the road. But it's what they told me next that terrifies me even now. The 2 men were brothers who had stopped the car, which I had seen parked near the lodge, and the driver was a woman. All of the details of what actually took place weren't explained to me, but apparently they had attacked the woman and seriously wounded her, and I just happened to drive onto them as they were digging a hole to bury the woman in. It turns out the woman was actually in the cab of the car, and I just didn't see her. She survived, luckily, but I read that she was never the same again due to head trauma. I decided to go walking around town, around midnight or so. Yeah, probably not the best idea, but I like to walk at night, given that it's a lot cooler and there aren't many people on the road. I walked to the gas station and got a soda and some chips, then made my way back home. Everything was fine, up until about 2 to 3 blocks from my house, when I happened to glance in the direction of a small, little opening of grass in the field, and I saw someone standing in the middle of the grass, dressed all in black, with their hood up. Of course, it instantly struck me as weird, given that the person was standing in the middle of a field with really no reason to be standing in the middle of nowhere, but I shrugged it off as just someone being strange. I continued walking home, and I glanced back once I was at the corner of the street, just to make sure they weren't following me. But when I looked back to where they were before, there was no one. At this point, I became a little unnerved, but I kept walking. And a couple of streets up, I seen another person wearing the same, all black, right out of the range of the streetlight. So, either this person was a really fast runner, or there were multiple people. I started to jog home, and once I got there, I locked all the doors and went to bed. Right as I was dozing off, I thought I heard a noise coming from outside. I have pretty good hearing, and I could tell it wasn't an animal snooping around. But I wasn't about to make sure. Just then, I heard the fence to our backyard open. And a moment after that, I heard the back sliding glass door trying to be opened, only to be stopped by the lock. I went to the sliding glass door and opened the blinds. I saw the same person standing on my back porch that I had seen earlier. I couldn't see their face as they had their hood up, with their head facing down. I said aloud, "I don't know who the hell you are, but you're lucky you're behind that door." Almost immediately after I said that, they gave one more effort at opening the door, and when they did, the lock popped up, and they stuck a knife through the opening trying to cut me as I was pushing it shut against their hand. Eventually, I slammed it, injuring their hand, which made them back up. I locked it back and closed the blinds, and told them I was calling the cops. I then heard the back gate slam shut, so I went to the front of the house to look out the window and see if he had left. I saw the person walking down the sidewalk, slowly. And in the light of the street lamp, I saw a large, sharp grin stretch across his face. I've never seen him again. At least, not yet. In the early 90s, my dad had just graduated law school. Due to the fact that he didn't have much money at the time, he had to travel across the state in his car and sleep in it. He was always the type that picked up hitchhikers, and most of the time, they were friendly or non-threatening people. One day he picked up a hitchhiker who was quite odd, though. He described him as a pale, lanky, tall man with wild hair and messed up clothing, like he didn't care about his appearance. The man entered the vehicle without saying a word. The odd thing is, he entered and sat in the back seat, even though there was a front seat open, but my dad just dismissed it. He tried to strike up a conversation with the man, but he responded with one-word answers. About an hour into driving, my dad recognized the man was staring at him, which really began to unsettle him. It was dusk when the man asked if he could pull over to go to the restroom, since there was a public bathroom nearby. My dad stopped and waited, but after a while began to get restless. He was already completely creeped out by the man, and the fact they were still about an hour away from his destination made things that much worse. It was getting dark, and he didn't really want to drive with the man in the car anymore, so he drove off. Flash forward about 6 months later, my dad was in his house reading the paper when he saw an article with the man that had hitchhiked with him, convicted of murdering 6 people. My dad never gave another hitchhiker a ride after that moment. I was at my local supermarket at around 11 p.m. and was chatting with the police officer that hangs around in there. We border a somewhat sketchy neighborhood. We typically talk about metal music, share stories of our lives, among a bunch of other things as well. This particular night, a lady comes up to the officer with her groceries and tells him there were 3 intimidating men by her car, and asks if he'll keep an eye out for her as she puts away her things. He tells her that he will, and I say I'll help. As she's putting away her things, he leans over and asks, "See anything?" And I reply with a no. As she leaves her parking spot, she rolls down her window and says, "The man in the car next to me had a gun in his lap." As soon as she pulled away, the suspicious car next to her sped away as fast as possible. The officer told me we might have either been assaulted or the store may have been robbed, and the fact that the lady pulled us out to keep a watch over her may have saved either us or the store. This story is from the point of view of a 16-year-old female. I live at home with my mom. My father doesn't have any contact with us ever, since Mom caught him cheating with one of his work colleagues. My mom works the night shift as a nurse at a hospital 30 minutes away from us, so most nights I am home alone with nothing but my dad's old baseball bat that he left behind to protect me. So, it was Friday evening. Mom was at work, and I decided to watch some shitty horror film I rented from the video store. I sat on the sofa watching the movie, cringing at the awful acting. My eyes started getting heavy, and soon enough I fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of heavy boots clunking on the floor. I started freaking out, but tried to remain as calm as possible. I started walking upstairs and saw something at the corner of my eye, and ran as fast as I could to my room. I went into defense mode and grabbed the baseball bat from under my bed and started checking all the rooms. My breathing intensified and I could feel the adrenaline kicking in. There was definitely someone in my house. Just as I reached the living room to grab the phone and dial 911, I felt a massive blow to my head. I woke up in the kitchen, stripped naked, and covered in scratches and bruises. My body felt like I'd been hit with a semi-truck, and my head was throbbing with pain. All I could do in that moment was lay there and sob uncontrollably. I felt violated and uncomfortable. I didn't know what happened while I was unconscious, and that's what scared me the most. Was this person still in my house? I checked the phone and had 40 missed calls from my mom. I called her back and she was panicking. I could hear the fear in her voice. "Jennifer, thank God you're alive. Why didn't you answer my calls? Please get out of the house now. The neighbors called and said they saw someone walk into the house just after I had left and were concerned. Please get out of the house now. I love you. I'll be home very soon. The police are on their way." I panicked even more and bolted to the front door, which, to my surprise, was already unlocked. I ran to our neighbor's house where they were expecting me. I told them my story as I waited for my mom to come home. The police didn't find anyone in my house, or any trace of evidence. There hadn't been any other similar cases in my area, so no links were found in the attack. No tests came back positive for pregnancy or disease, so that was somewhat of a relief. I just wish that asshole who hurt me could rot in a jail cell. Mom doesn't work night shifts anymore, and has had extra security systems installed around our house. That was easily the most terrifying thing I've had happen to me, and I will never forget this experience. I think the thing I fear most is not knowing how that disgusting excuse of a human knew the doors were unlocked. Why wasn't he found? Is he still out there, doing the same to other young girls? It disgusts me to think about it. Moral of the story: always lock the doors.